Hey everybody, it's Matt's Metal Show, and we're back on the couch, yeah! Out of the land of darkness. That was my man cave. And what are we here to talk about? We're here to talk about metal! Metal! Couple of things I wanted to go over. Just thinking about what I was going to do for episode 5 of Matt's Metal Show. We just did the Ronnie Dio tribute special. Like, I'm acting like it was a big budget. Cost nothing. Yeah. But there was a couple of things that I would do in my research after the fact when I was doing my Ronnie things that I came across that I wanted to talk about. So let's get ready for episode 5 of Matt's Metal Show. A couple of things I wanted to do. I want to put on a playlist for you guys for every episode. That way you guys can go out and find some really cool metal. And it'll keep you guys like looking into stuff that maybe you haven't discovered. There's always a band or two out there that you've overlooked or by accident or just never been exposed to them. So I do want to do that. I'm not really prepared to do that right now, but we will get to that. Like today, man, I went out and I did the yard and I put on Motorhead. You know me, evil eye. You know me, prepare to die. You know me, the snake bite kiss, the devil's grip, the iron fist. Remember in the movie Airheads where he's like, who'd win in a fight, Lemmy or God? Trick question, Lemmy is God. Lemmy's a great musician, and there's a bunch of Motorhead songs that I like, but really Motorhead's never really been one of my favorite bands. I know people are gonna be like, what? Aren't they the godfathers of heavy metal? No. They're kind of second generation metal. And they have great songs, like I said, but the thing is with Motorhead is after a while Lemmy's voice just kind of gets to me, and he has great lyrics, don't get me wrong, I love Lemmy, Lemmy's a cool fucking dude, man, but it just, his voice after a while is just like, ugh. Some people say that about Geddy Lee from Rush, so, some people don't like Rush for that. I'm not a big, huge Motorhead fan for that reason. But, overall, dude, Ace of Spades, Damage Case. Move over for Damage Case! Because the thing is I can sing Lemmy, and if I can sing it, then it's not awesome. Anyways, I know there's a bunch of people out there getting torches and pitchforks. Let's hang him, because he's talking shit about Lemmy. First of all, it's just my opinion. Calm down. I didn't mean anything wrong, but what else did I listen to today? So I popped that on, and then when it was done, I popped on Michael Schenker, MSG, the second Michael Schenker group album, and I think the coolest thing is just you put on your iPod and you pop on and you're doing something like, I have a big yard, so it takes forever to do. And so I went through a couple albums, like about 4 albums. But just to discover, like, I remember, you listen to like, Ready to Rock and Sleeping Dogs Lie and Never Trust a Stranger. But then I got into the second side of the album, which it's not even an album, it's totally digital, but I got But I Want More. It's got that moody Michael Schenker intro, goes on for about a minute, and then just, dude, I haven't heard that song in forever, so for me it was kind of cool to just kind of rediscover it. And don't give me love, is. You know? That was my Gary Barden. It was awful. Anyways, there was a couple things that I wanted to talk about. One, people love ranting, and I love to rant, so I'm going to rant. This is rant number 1. Let's talk about the other day I was on Facebook, and one of these things popped up, and down at the House of Blues in October, August, something, I don't know, in a couple months. There's a band playing called Queensryche. Now, here's my problem, and I remember watching a thing with Eddie Trunk and Dee Schneider, and Dee kind of got called out on the carpet because he made a comment on Twitter or some shit about Doug Aldrich and the fact that he's in Whitesnake, and and a little later on, Dee kind of retracted what he said about Doug, because Eddie Trunk pointed out, Doug Aldrich has been in Whitesnake for like 10 years, like a decade or something. He's played on like 2 albums. But what Dee was saying is that, Doug's a great guy, he's a good guitar player and stuff, but he doesn't really consider him one of the original members of the band. And I agree with him. Dude, all these guys that I grew up with, they all end up in a band at some point. Vinnie Moore, ended up in UFO, and Marty Friedman ended up in Megadeth, and, Guthrie Govan ended up in Asia, and who's in Asia now? Like, there's another guitar player that, that's been around. All these guys that were like shredders and stuff that played on like Mike Varney albums, they all ended up in legitimate bands. But the problem was they all ended up, with the exception probably of Marty Friedman, because truly if anybody really looks at it, and even Dee Schneider said this, Marty Friedman is the guitar player for Megadeth. He played on more albums than anybody besides Dave Mustaine. And Dave Mustaine has been searching for Marty's replacement since the day that Marty walked out of that band. And we all know that, Dave is... I'm not going to call him a control freak because I don't personally know him. I've met him a bunch of times. He's a fucking asshole. He's Dave. We expect that from Dave. It's just... I've even stood there while, I was at the NAMM show, and David Ellefson, the bass player for Megadeth, I was listening to him, and this is right before they were recording Super Collider, which I'm not really a fan of, and he was talking to some guy from Australia or something. The guy had a really thick accent. I remember I asked him for a picture, and he was kind of a douche to me. He was like, "Oh, I'm going to be over there in a couple minutes, and then you can go stand in line and get a picture with me." And I was like, "Fuck off. You're the bass player for Megadeth. Fuck off." But I stood there and listened to him, and he was bad-mouthing Dave Mustaine. David Ellefson, who's in Megadeth, was sitting there talking to this dude, and he was totally talking shit. He was like, "Oh yeah, we're doing the new Megadeth album, or should I say the new Dave Mustaine album?" Like he was totally talking shit. Here's a guy that's supposed to be this born again Christian. That's the other thing that kind of pisses me off is you see these guys like Dave Mustaine and Dave Ellefson and a bunch of other guys too, and they sit there and preach about how they're Christian and all this shit. Really? What part of Christian are you? So you're the Christian that can say whatever the fuck you want and do whatever the fuck you want, but you're a Christian. Whatever, dude. You're in metal. Alice Cooper's a Christian. I don't want to get into religion because people get upset. Oh no, don't talk about my God like that. This is my God. Eddie! He's my God. Anyways, besides that, I'm going off on a tangent. I always do. But anyways, what Dee was saying is that there's all these guys that join these established bands, and then suddenly they think that they're a member of the band. Like Whitesnake, I mean, dude, when John Sykes left Whitesnake, that was it. I remember when I was a kid, after when in '87 when they came out with the Whitesnake album, with Neil Murray and John Sykes on it, and who's the drummer? Wasn't Cozy, because Cozy was on the previous album. I saw them too. I saw Whitesnake with Cozy Powell and John Sykes and Neil Murray and David Coverdale. They were amazing. I can't remember who the drummer is. It'll be right here. I'll look it up. Anyways, Coverdale wanted to make money. He had a bunch of people whispering in his ear. So he came out with the Whitesnake album. He redid a couple of songs on there. Here I Go Again was from the Saint and Sinner days. You could listen to it. It was just spruced up a little bit more keyboard stuff. It sounded kind of poppy, pop rock. Because this was at the height of hair metal, where MTV was huge, and if you wanted to make money, like some struggling bands like Whitesnake. I mean, Whitesnake was huge in Europe. Like Deep Purple, Deep Purple was huge in Europe, but they weren't this huge entity in America. They were more European, and you ask Lars Ulrich, or Yngwie, or those guys that grew up in Europe, they'll tell you like Rainbow and friggin' Deep Purple, those bands were, but for us it was like Van Halen and AC/DC and Zeppelin, of course, was worldwide, but Whitesnake wasn't a huge band over here. They were big in Japan and stuff. They were gods in Japan, but they wanted to. America's where the money was, So Coverdale recorded that album, and then he ditched everybody in the band. And then what he did was he went out and he hired Rudy Sarzo from Ozzy. He hired Vivian Campbell and Adrian Vandenberg, big giant monster Adrian Vandenberg, and Tommy Aldridge from Ozzy, and then they stood around on stage and played, all John Sykes stuff, and acted like it was real. I remember they opened for Motley Crue on the Girls, Girls, Girls tour. They called it the Tour of the Snatch Magnets because they all thought they were so cute and stuff. And the thing that's funny is now you look at it and you're like, well, y'all look like chicks, so maybe that's why chicks liked you, because you all could share makeup and hair tips. You watch the Still of the Night video and you see Adrian Vandenberg up there with the bow and he's playing the solo, and you're just like, whatever. I like Adrian Vandenberg, Friday Night, and Voodoo and, Waiting for an Alibi, right? That was Vandenberg. But Vandenberg never really was huge here either, so, These guys wanted to get paid. They were hired guns, and that was the problem with the 80s, and the problem with hair metal was a lot of bands started switching players and stuff like that, and, and then Vivian Campbell jumped ship from Dio, which, I talked about in my Dio special. Nobody really knows why. I mean, but something happened, and him and Ronnie just never got along after a certain point. And, Vivian, you're in a band that you have input in, and then you join a band that you have no input in. That kind of sucks. Because, Whitesnake was always a vehicle for David Coverdale, pretty much. So, but anyways. And then Rudy Sarzo's up there, Rudy Sarzo's been doing the same moves since he was in Quiet Riot back in the 70s. He does he hits his bass. Watch the After Hours video with Randy Rhoads. Rudy's get the wooden cross. Rudy's a cool guy, though. Met Rudy. He's a nice guy. He doesn't talk a lot, but... and you had that. So, Dee Snider, back on my tangent, Dee Snider made a comment about Doug Aldridge being in Whitesnake, and apparently people took offense to it, so he kind of retracted and apologized to Doug. But I agree with him, because, here I said, at the House of Blues in a couple of months, there's a band called Queensryche playing. It's not Queensryche. Come on, it's not Queensryche. Okay, now... Some people could say Queensryche stopped being Queensryche back in '97 when Chris DeGarmo left the band. You could say that. I mean, because he was an original member and he wrote a lot of the material. And if you kind of watch and you kind of look, once DeGarmo left the band, dude, they did Operation Mindcrime 2 it was it was horrifying. You know, Mindcrime 1 is like my favorite Queensryche album of all time. Mindcrime 2, I wouldn't use that to line the litter box in my bathroom. My cat wouldn't even crap on it. She would get out and go crap on the floor because Mindcrime 2 is that lame. Unfortunately, it had Ronnie on it, Ronnie James Dio. It would have been cool if he would have been on the first Mindcrime, but like I wrote a review about it on Amazon. I remember saying like, has anybody been sitting around waiting 18 years for them to do Mindcrime 2? You know, those people that have been sitting around waiting for them to do The Wall Part 2, and and I think Pink Floyd was another band that he mentioned, that D. Schneider mentioned, and I agree. Once Roger Waters left Pink Floyd, it wasn't Pink Floyd anymore. Roger Waters is a huge part of Pink Floyd. Roger Waters was Pink Floyd. Now, there are exceptions. Bon Scott, he died, and they got Brian Johnson to replace him in AC/DC, and they were still successful. And you could say, oh, well, what about Sammy Hagar replacing David Lee Roth? Yeah, I mean, because they continued to be successful. They changed their sound with Sammy Hagar. There was the David Lee Roth stuff, which was the shuck and jive, cool, hipster Eddie playing amazing to... I'm trying to think of a fucking... trying to think of a Van Hagar song, Love Comes Walking In. Love comes walking in, and then you take a whatever. Summer nights at my radio. I mean, they moved in a completely different direction. So they weren't trying to copy Dave and Dave's style. They moved on in a whole different pop direction. They became pop. There's certain instances, like when Ronnie James Dio replaced Ozzy in Black Sabbath, the direction of the band changed and it became successful. So the band continued on. Now with Queensryche, first of all, Queensryche has been around since 1982. That's 33 years. Now, this isn't anything new. Jeff Tate's been out of the band since 2012. And when he left the band, he went out real quick and he made a Queensryche album. And then the band went out and with their new singer, whatever the hell his name is, and they made a Queensryche album, and it was like the War of the Queensryches. Now, Queensryche went to court, and they fought over the name, and Scott Rockenfield, Michael Wilton, and Eddie Jackson won the Queensryche brand name. And Jeff Tate did not. Now, Jeff Tate, there were some stipulations, and they were weird, because I read about it. I looked it up because I was pissed off. Because they're calling themselves Queensryche, and they're not freaking Queensryche. They're like the three guys left in Queensryche. Because let's be honest, guys, Chris DeGarmo and freaking Jeff Tate are two probably of the most important pieces of freaking Queensryche. Who's going, oh, thank God Scott Rockenfield's still in the band. Thank God Eddie Jackson is still in Queensryche. It's still Queensryche with Eddie Jackson. Now, I guess Jeff Tate, he can perform, these are the stipulations, he can say the former lead singer of Queensryche for like some stipulated amount of time, and he's the only one that can perform Mindcrime 1 and 2 in their entirety if he chooses to do so. Anyways, for bands like Queensryche, you're not Queensryche anymore. You're not. And I understand there's a brand name, but for your fans, that's insulting. And there are those poor unfortunate idiots out there that don't know that guy up there singing's not supposed to be in the band, or the what is it, like the sixth replacement of Chris DeGarmo, whatever that guy's name is, guitar player number 7. They don't know. It's like with the Kiss thing, and I'm going to go into Kiss in a minute here, but it's like with the Kiss thing, and there's been a huge debate on, is Kiss a band or a brand? And Gene Simmons will tell you that they're a brand, you know. But your fans, the people who actually pay your salaries and buy your albums and your merchandise and made you rich and famous, um, yeah, that's kind of who did that, right? Your fans, the people who buy your merchandise and listen to your music, and wear your T-shirts. Those are the people putting money in your wallets. There, people. Yeah. Anyways, and you could call it a brand, but your fans think of it as a band, and that's the problem with Kiss. Is the rock and roll side of Kiss has been dead for years. It's deader than Mark St. John and Eric Carr. It is. It's a business. There's no feeling in Kiss, and there hasn't been in years and years. And that's the sad part about Kiss, is that you've taken the coolness of being a rock band and you turned it into a sideshow that makes money. Like with Tommy Thayer and Eric Singer playing Peter, Chris, and Ace Frehley. It's like, uh, it's creepy. I'll get back to that, though. I'm going to get back to Kiss because that's important. But like I said, it's not Queensryche. It's not Journey. Judas Priest. Rob Halford's back in the band. They have a replacement for KK. And KK was an integral member of the band, but KK retired and the band still wanted to continue on. Are we missing KK? Not really. I mean, not really. Come on. I hate to say it, but KK is replaceable. They just did it. Malcolm Young, they had to. The guy's in a rest home with dementia. His nephew had to take over. Are they insulting his legacy? No, they're trying to move on. Is AC/DC going to change their direction because they got a new rhythm guitar player? No. But it's still AC/DC. You know why? Because it still has Angus Young and it has Brian Johnson. Okay, now people are, Bon Scott. No, shut the fuck up. Bon Scott is dead. Bon Scott gave up his right to be in AC/DC by drinking himself to death. I'm just saying. There are certain bands, because we all know some of them have tried to, I heard, I was watching a little show with Sammy Hagar, and he got a phone call when, Aerosmith was doing, they were going in to record or something, and Steven Tyler fell off the wagon for the 400 millionth time and started, dropping pain pills and doing crazy stuff. And they called Sammy Hagar and actually asked him if he'd like to come try out to be the singer. And Sammy thought about it for a second, but then there is no Aerosmith without Steven Tyler. There's not. If you called it Aerosmith, Woo. I'm serious. Like, if they had the balls to call that Aerosmith without Steven Tyler in it, then, dude, I mean, I think that's Joe Perry calling me. Hold on. I just told Joe Perry he's lost his mind. Or wait, what was the Steven Tyler? Red dog living in the movie. Hot tramp, daddy little cutie. So fine, they never see her leaving by the back door. Man, I'm just saying, there's certain bands. You can't Aerosmith without Steven Tyler. First of all, it's a little late in the game to be like with Queensryche. I still go. You don't think 30 years is a little late in the game to be changing lead singers? Come on. Aerosmith. I mean, shoot. When did they start? 74. It's really late. 41 years. 41 years. You change your lead singer. That's why Sammy Hagar, he was like, no. He's all that. Oh, I'll totally play with those guys because they're awesome, but that will never work. Come on. Plus, Sammy Hagar going to be up there singing freaking Walk This Way. I am now telling the computer what it can do with a lifetime supply of chocolate. There's a reason why when John Bonham died that Led Zeppelin wrote a letter to their fans and signed it Led Zeppelin and said we will not continue on without our brother John Bonham. I almost said John Bon Jovi. It's all the same. They're close. Don't get crap. Yeah, because they knew like John Bonham was an integral part of Led Zeppelin. Sure, they've played shows with his son, and they played with Phil Collins and different, but they don't call it Led Zeppelin. Okay, Led Zeppelin is done. The Beatles are done. Once John died, there is no more Beatles. You don't play around with things like that. Now, it's kind of like Black Sabbath. After Dio left, they called it Black Sabbath featuring Tony Iommi. And they went on and they had Ray Gillen and Tony Martin and Glenn Hughes, like all these different people and all these things. And it wasn't Black Sabbath, and nobody even paid attention to it. I mean, you know, that's the only reason why they called Ronnie back up in '92. You know, Geezer wasn't even in the band, and you could see, like, you know, and that was the thing with Black Sabbath, you know, because when I was doing my research and stuff, and I watched a bunch of interviews and stuff with Ronnie, and, you know, I found out, like, what happened with the whole Live Evil thing where Ronnie and Vinny, the drummer from Heaven and Hell, when they were mixing Live Evil, they would show up every day at 2 o'clock, like they were supposed to, at the studio, and then they would start working on the album. Now, the only thing is that Iommi and Geezer, they wouldn't show up. They would show up at 4 when Ronnie and Vinny left, and then they would start doing stuff. And then this happened for like a week or two, and then Ronnie got a phone call saying like, oh, I think it's best that Tony mixes this album. And that was why, you know, Ronnie left Black Sabbath the first time, because Geezer and Iommi were such dicks, you know, and they thought like, oh, dude, you're Tony Iommi, but look how successful you were without Ronnie James Dio or without Ozzy. How successful were you? You weren't. He got arrested in '92 on the Dehumanizer tour for not paying child support. Like one of the shows, he got arrested after it. You know, yeah, Tony Iommi wasn't exactly like making millions hand over fist. That's why they ended up breaking up the second time, is because he needed money, and that's why they did those shows opening for Ozzy, and that's why Ronnie left. He was like, they were trying to make out with Ozzy. They were trying to hook back up with Ozzy and try and make money, you know, and Ronnie was like, you know, go woo Ozzy on your own time. I'm out of here, you know. And then finally they got back together after all that crap and stupid stuff. But, you know, Geezer Butler is the one that called Ronnie the second time, because what was Geezer doing? You know, you act like you're in Sabbath, but what did Geezer Butler do when he wasn't in Black Sabbath? Did he join the Geezer Butler band? You know? Was he hugely successful? No, he wasn't. And the thing is Ozzy went on to have a successful solo career. Ronnie James Dio went on to have a successful solo career. Ian Gillan went back to be Deep Purple. You know, freaking Ray Gillan started Badlands. I mean, all these guys had successful things away from Black Sabbath, where the guys in Sabbath, they weren't even successful. You know, they had, you know, a string of bad albums, but they had like that bad attitude. But still calling a band that band name when integral members of the band are no longer in that band. And I know I just went on like a 900 angle tangent, but Kiss is not Kiss anymore. Queensryche is certainly not Queensryche anymore. Journey is not Journey anymore. Come on, guys. You know, it's like Blue Oyster Cult, you know? You see them in like Rudy Sarzo was in Blue Oyster Cult. I think I was in Blue Oyster Cult at some point. You know, like, dude, really? When you go and see a band and there's like a guy that wasn't even an original member, but he was like in the second or third lineup and they're still using that name. And I understand it's business. You know, I understand about branding. I understand about you're trying to make money. And that's what the guys in Queensryche were trying to do. They were trying to feed their families and keep the Queensryche thing going. But apparently it wasn't this huge juggernaut, money-making giant scheme. Apparently it wasn't very lucrative at all. If they were like so desperate to make money that they couldn't pay the rent on their apartment or something, apparently they weren't doing very awesome. If you saw Queensryche and Puppet Show, or was it Puppet Show and Queensryche? Queensryche Cabaret, if you watch that mess. But you know, the funny thing about Queensryche was I remember seeing Jeff Tate on that metal show where he lied through his teeth and acted all innocent. Like, I don't know why these guys kicked me out of the band. I've seen Queensryche live like a bunch of times, you know, and Jeff Tate is kind of crazy. Like, he's kind of crazy. In fact, the week that Ronnie James Dio passed away, we went and saw them, and he didn't even mention Ronnie's passing, which I was pissed off about because the opening band, Sled, sang a song for Ronnie. Ronnie was on their album, and he didn't even mention Ronnie's passing, so that pissed me off. But the other thing was, you know, we would go see him, me and my buddy Ryan. We would go see Queensryche, and Jeff Tate, he said something crazy. Like one year, he went off about seatbelts. I remember he was like, you know, when I was a kid, you could jump in the back of a pickup truck and drive to Alabama, but now I got to put my kid in a seatbelt. And like me and my buddy, we're smartasses, so we were like, yeah, fuck seatbelts, because we thought it was really you're ranting about wearing a seatbelt. You don't want to put your kid in a seatbelt? You want your kid to go through the windshield of your fucking car because you used to drive in a pickup truck? People used to drink laudanum and fucking shoot cocaine into their arm, you know, and fucking do all kinds of crazy shit in the past. But, you know, we learn that some things aren't good. And then, like, I remember he was talking, like, on another tour, he was talking about how him and his wife are, like, matchmakers. And so anyways, the Queensryche guys, the funny thing was in 2012, 30th anniversary, 30 years working with this guy. I've seen him maybe half a dozen times, and I know he's friggin' crazy. You worked with this guy for 30 friggin' years, and you had no idea that he was a complete lunatic. His wife was the manager of the band. His daughter was, like, in charge of the fan club. And apparently, like, now, when Jeff was on that metal show, he was like, I'd like to know what happened, you know. He was acting, like, all innocent. But apparently he got in, like, a fist fight with Scott Rockenfield, and he, like, spit on him, which he even admitted to. But they fired his wife, they fired his daughter, and basically it was like the last three guys in Queensryche. They were just tired of him, you know? They were just tired of him. It was like Jeff was running the show. But who else was going to run that tired dinosaur? You know, listen to anything past Mindcrime, you know, or Empire. Anything past Empire, you know. There was a couple of cool songs here and there, but most of it wasn't good. You know, that's why Chris DiCarmo left, because he was just like, we've gone as far as we could. Jeff's voice, you know, he started to fade. He got old and fat and bald, and, you know, but damn those seatbelts. Those seatbelts can go to hell. But now they call it Queensryche, and, you know, I know they're trying to buy another Maserati or, you know, get that solid gold bathtub that they wanted. Because, like, come on, they got to have some money. I mean, if you don't have any money, I mean, they had some, you know, they've been touring for 32 years. You didn't put any money aside? Well, I don't know what to tell you. I think I saw Scott Rockenfield working at Walmart. Hi, my name's Scott. How may I help you? Aren't you the drummer for Queensryche? Why don't you ask Motley Crue how successful they were when they kicked Vince Neil out of the band and got John Corabi? They made the Motley Crue album, and it was a good album, but it wasn't Motley Crue. It wasn't. They were so proud of that album. They actually worked together as a band, and they weren't like banging chicks and slamming heroin, and they actually were like kind of excited, like, oh my God, and they tried to make this masterpiece, and the world hated it. And you know why the world hated it? Because it didn't have Vince Neil on it. It didn't. Even when they went and did that piece of garbage that was Generation Swine, it still sold more albums than that freaking Motley Crue album with John Corabi on it. And that album is... oh my God. Have you ever listened to that? Let's let Tommy Lee sing. Let's let Tommy Lee sing a song about his kid, and then sing a song about his wife. That album's garbage. But, but the thing that was the difference is Vince came back into the band, and they were successful. They went back out on tour. They started putting out albums and stuff. And then Tommy left the band. And the funny thing is they continued on without Tommy. Now, a lot of people think, and I'm one of them, a lot of people think that Motley Crue is Nicky, Tommy, Mick, and Vince, and that's it. If it's not those four guys, it's not Motley Crue. But apparently, like, the rest of the world didn't really give a shit that Randy Castillo from Ozzy was the drummer, and I went and saw him on the new Tattoo tour, and they had the chick from Hole was the drummer. I remember watching, and I was like, dude, who is that? Because Randy Castillo was in the hospital and he ended up passing away. But then Tommy came back in the band, and woo. But the thing is they were never gonna stop calling it Motley Crue. Even though they poor John Corabi. You could read his accounts in the dirt. By Motley Crue, and poor guy, because they were proud of that album. They were excited. They thought they were going to be like Van Hagar, that they were going to enjoy this successful career and move away from the bubblegum, hey, I'm banging chicks and drinking whiskey and slamming heroin in my arm and partying. They thought they were going to move away from that, but the problem is, like Ronnie James Dio, when he moved away from the sword and sorcery stuff, he wasn't successful, because that's what people wanted to hear from him. People want to hear Motley Crue. They want to hear Girls, Girls, Girls at the Dollhouse in Fort Lauderdale. Girls, Girls, Girls raising hell at the Seventh Veil. They want to hear about strippers and drugs and shit like that. They don't want anything to think about. It's Motley Crue, for Christ's sakes. It wasn't brain surgery. Those guys, for what they did, were amazing. Now, were they the greatest musicians in the world? No, not by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, Tommy's probably the most respected out of all of them, because he's a good drummer. I guess he's not even a drummer now. He's like a fucking DJ. Mixmaster Tommy Lee. He played guitar in like Methods of Mayhem, and did rap metal. He had a song about his, yeah. Wow. All right, so let's move on. We're done talking about that. They're not Queensryche. They never will be. Not without Jeff Tate and Chris DeGarmo. On June 7th, just about a week ago, right? Today's the 13th. Yeah, a little less than a week ago. Week from tomorrow. Christopher Lee passed away. And I just want to talk about Christopher Lee real quick. And people are going to be like, why are you talking about Christopher Lee? What does he have to do with metal? Christopher Lee was the actor, of course. We know him as Saruman from Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. You know, we know him as Count Dooku. Dude, George Lucas. Somebody should have punched George Lucas in the face for even coming up with that name. How lame! Your main villain is called Dooku. That doesn't sound scary. Is that? I mean, Christopher Lee had the bent lightsaber, you know, and he was a badass. But come on, you killed off Darth Maul in like 10 minutes, and he was a badass. So whatever, Lucas. He was also like Willy Wonka's dad in that really creepy Tim Burton, Johnny Depp, Willy Wonka movie. You know, he's done like a million things. He was in, you know, he did a lot of things with Tim Burton. He was also like Francisco Scaramanga from The Man with the Golden Gun, you know, from the James Bond movie. And then he played Dracula about 200 million times. But what people don't know about Christopher Lee is, one, he was a war hero. You know, he started out in the Finnish army, and then he joined the British army, and then he was like a pilot or something in the freaking Air Force during World War II. You know, he was a knight. He was Sir Christopher Lee. And what people really, really don't know is Christopher Lee was also a musician, and he loved metal. He came out with albums Charlemagne by the Sword and the Cross in 2010, and then Charlemagne, The Omens of Death in 2013. And I'm sure there was going to be a follow-up, because I think he did want to do like 3 albums. Some of that stuff's cool. You can watch it on YouTube. There's videos for some of that stuff. He also did some EPs, a Heavy Metal Christmas in 2012, and he did a Heavy Metal Christmas 2 in 2013, and then Metal Night in 2014. What a guy, man. Dude. You know, Christopher Lee is one of those guys, one of those actors that just, he's like Sean Connery or Alec Guinness, or, you know, just one of those Richard Harris or David Niven or Omar Sharif. You know, he's one of those classic actors that just did everything. And this guy was like, he loved metal. How cool is that? Dude, he was 93 years old when he passed away last week. He lived a full life. What a guy. What an awesome, like, body of work that he left behind. And on top of that, you can go and find it and look it up and listen to Metal Christmas, because he does this song on Metal Christmas. It was amazing. Like, I watched the video. There was a video for it. He had a song called Jingle Hell on his Christmas album. You gotta listen to it. It's freaking awesome. It kind of reminds me of Christmas with the Devil from Spinal Tap, you know. But like, dude, just an homage to Christopher Lee, man. Thank you for all the things that you gave us, and and thank you for your love of metal. You know, truly one of the greats. You know. One of the things that I stumbled across while I was doing my research for my Ronnie James Dio tribute special, that huge budgeted Ronnie James Dio special that I did last, I came across some footage of protesters at Ronnie's funeral. Really? Where do I begin? And, you know, nobody that would protest would actually watch this. So, you know, if you are, you're... Get the fuck out! It's a great idea. First of all, when you wake up in the morning and you're a crazy religious psychopath, I wonder, do you have your signs pre-made and they're like circling your bed when you sleep at night? I wonder that, you know, or do you make them on the spot? But the fact that somebody woke up, a group of people woke up on the day of Ronnie's funeral and said, you know, it'd be a good idea making signs saying Ronnie Dio burn in hell and going to Forest Lawn and standing outside and marching around like a bunch of idiots and chanting and doing whatever the hell you were doing. Now, when you thought of doing that, did you realize that there was how many thousands of metalheads like showing up to that thing? I mean, because it was a public funeral. I mean, there was a private ceremony inside, but there was public. There were seats and stuff, and you know, they had a big video monitor and stuff. Like, first of all, I was blown away. I remember when that happened, and I was upset for like a week and a half. And then going and doing my research, it upset me again because the audacity of people. First of all, take your religion and shove it. Anyways, the guy's dead. You won. Why would you do that? How disrespectful can you possibly be? Not only that, but how dangerous is your thinking? Like, I'm going to go down and protest a funeral. Now, thank you to Ronnie's fans who took a deep breath, realized that these people are fucking worthless pieces of shit anyways, and it's like pointless to even argue or even like acknowledge them, because that's all they want. They want to be acknowledged. And don't take away their power. And you guys did, and that was great, because I'm just saying, like, you know, it could have been like stomping narcs at a biker rally. I mean, how crazy can you possibly be? It's like people go out and they try and create conflict in a losing battle. What were you going to accomplish by doing your stupid little things and toting your little signs? The only thing you were going to accomplish was inciting a riot and getting the shit kicked out of you, or, you know, or drumming up. And you did. You drummed up publicity. You got on the news. You got your picture on the news. You're such a cool person. But you know what? I don't know what religion that you are representing that day, but I can assure you that any religion out there would not condone such acts of, you know, senseless, just disgraceful disrespect. This is just disrespect. I don't care if you didn't like Ronnie James Dio, but you don't show up at his funeral with signs telling everybody he's going to burn in hell. Of course he's going to burn in hell. He sang it in heaven and hell. He wanted to burn in hell. He's down there like, sing me a song, you're a singer. You know, do me a wrong, you're a bringer of evil. The devil is never a maker. The less that you give, you're a taker. I'm just saying. I don't know how I would have reacted. I'm just glad sensibility took over. But, you know, first of all, not just Ronnie James Dio, but anybody that goes out and lifts up a sign at somebody's fucking funeral. What are you thinking? I've heard people like protesting like soldiers' funerals and stuff. If you just want to get your head kicked in, well, why don't you just go to like downtown LA and start shouting, you know, racist comments? They'll be glad to just beat the living shit out of you. You know, probably end up dead hanging off the side of a building. But to go and attack people who are in mourning, to rip open a wound that's already bleeding. Are you insane? I mean, that right there is just pure insanity. And anybody that's toting a religion that would do some shit like that, well, you deserve to get your ass kicked. You do. You're just trying to incite conflict. What a douche. What a bunch of douches. I can't even. I mean, I hope you're. Anyways, Total disrespect. Just wanted to chime in on that. And now I'm going to forget about it. I forgot about it for 5 years. I'm going to forget about it for the rest of my life. Because shit like that just needs to be erased from your mind. There's enough conflict out in the world as enough. But for people to go out of their way to just start shit, it's unbelievable. And then they go, oh, why did I get my face kicked in? Why did somebody, like, break a sign over my head and try and stab me to death? Gee, I wonder why. I don't condone violence, but whatever. My pizza's ready, yeah!